Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending where in the world you are at this time. I'm Rabbi Ari Kievman, and we are going live right here on the Jewish Learning Institute. Today, we are talking about the sandwich generation during the pandemic. And indeed, this is a very pertinent and relevant topic, particularly not only because we are presently during a period of a pandemic, but also we stand 2 days before the great holiday of Shavuos, when we as Jewish people indeed became the Jewish nation on this holiday. And I'm coming to you live from South Africa, Sandton, South Africa. It is the financial headquarters of this country, the richest square mile in Africa. And here in Africa, we know lots of people come from all over the world to see the Big Five. The Big Five, people like to go to the safaris and see all the wonderful animals that South Africa features. But we know that on Shavuos, just a few days away, is when we celebrate not just the Big Five, but the Big Ten, the Ten Commandments. And commandment number 5 is the topic of today's discussion. What is the 5th commandment? Well, certainly you know. Kabed es avicha v'esimecha, to honor your parents. So to imagine this idea of the sandwich generation, and for those who are unfamiliar with it, quickly to familiarize yourself what the sandwich generation is. It is those of us who are part of, Generation X, who are not only caring for our young children who we're raising, but also taking care of elderly parents while raising our young children at the same time. And that could be challenging for some. It has many challenges within it, juggling the multiple responsibilities from educating our children, school, particularly now when our children's school is facilitated virtually, and you have to look at the kids and look after the kids and make sure each one of the kids, and thank God my wife and I have 6 beautiful children, and each one of them has to get into their classroom and in the right time. And at the same time, you have work responsibilities and childcare, and don't forget self-care. You can't neglect yourself. So it's a balancing act of looking after your own children, but for many at the same time looking after their parents. And this could be something that sometimes becomes very overwhelming. People get stressed. It's certainly not easy at the best of times. So certainly during challenging times like now, how much more so it is certainly that much more difficult. And personally, my position here in South Africa, for those who know me, we have a shul in Sandton Central. We get to meet many visitors from all over the world, people who come all the time visiting South Africa. We're like the Times Square of South Africa. And our shul is right outside the Grand Central Station. But that's only part of my work. The majority of my day is involved with the elderly. We have a great program, Chabad Seniors Club. And until now, our program was one where senior citizens would come from throughout Greater Johannesburg, all the different areas, many of them coming from areas that have been abandoned by many of the young families that moved into the suburbs. In fact, like many parts of other countries, certainly in the United States, where neighborhoods shift and change and demographics are constantly moving and people move out, and that's something that we experienced here. But there are Jews who are still left in some of the older neighborhoods, and our bus would collect them and bring them to the Central Chabad House here in Johannesburg, where we offer them refreshments and networking, socializing, shiurim, workshops, lectures on many different Jewish topics, a nutritious, hot, delicious lunch. And then afterwards, they have the choice of sometimes going on outings and trips or getting some tech tutors to teach them how to use technology. So it's a really great program. However, we know what COVID-19 has presented to us, and we had to rethink how to present these programs during these challenging times. Personally, I recently lost my father, and being one who was living abroad for the last 10 years, at such a distance, it was difficult for me to play my role as one caring for my elderly father. So there are many people in the sandwich generation. Some who live close by, some who invite their parents to move into their homes, others who are living at a distance and are sometimes at a loss. How could I care for my elderly parent when I'm indeed so far away? So this is something that many people grapple with and deal with in many different ways. And the question we're going to address in today's short segment is, what are our responsibilities? And considering that it's part of the Big Ten, it even makes it into the big first five, let's discuss what we can do and how we could fulfill our biblical responsibility to our parents, at the same time not neglecting our children, and balancing that act to ensure that we're doing it in the proper way. For many people, and I speak to people in my community and congregation, they don't want to be a burden onto their children. I was just speaking with one of my community members this afternoon, and it reminded me of the story of Rabbi Kusil Lepler, who was a follower, a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. When he blessed him with wealth, he said, I don't want that challenge of wealth. So then he blessed him with longevity. And he said, he made a condition, a stipulation to the blessing. And what was that? He said, I don't want it to be peasant years. And my understanding of peasant years is years that one is relegated to an old age home in not a healthy condition, perhaps vegetating away. And that really doesn't feel comfortable. In today's day and age, people are living older and healthier, and especially if we're taking care of our health, we have a good chance. Medicine has been advancing, and we have a good chance of certainly having a good long life. And if we don't want to be a burden onto our children, then we have to look after our health during this time. So for those who are even at a greater distance from their parents, there are many things that one could do. Take, for example, I visit many of the old age homes, many of the nursing and retirement facilities here. We've arranged that people could have Zoom or FaceTime sessions with their parents who they can't see at this time. There are those, we have had food parcel deliveries. So as a child, it's ultimately your responsibility. Sadly here I've seen a phenomenon where people have moved abroad and think that our local organization called the Chevra Kadisha. What's interesting is, in any other country, Chevra Kadisha is the burial society. Here in South Africa, the Chevra Kadisha is the social welfare, and they look after the needs, mostly of the elderly, however, also of other people in the community, anyone who needs their assistance. And many people just think that it's okay to leave the parents to be taken care of by the institutions. And that is ultimately wrong, because it is a child's responsibility to look after their parents. So what can you do? Practically, there's lots of things, and maybe we'll discuss a few practical suggestions at the conclusion of today's session. Certainly, I know if you're even nearby, but your parents aren't living with you, and you have to be socially distant for their well-being, perhaps you could leave a key with people, give their medical information, but those are all matters of practical guidance. Let's first talk about the importance of honoring our parents as part of the Ten Commandments, and we'll keep it very simple today without getting into too much detail. Number one is you owe it to them. There's a debt of gratitude we owe our parents. It's called Hakaras Hatov. They're the ones who brought us into the world. They are the ones who fed us, who looked after us, took care of us when we were helpless infants, children. We know what it's like now that I'm a parent of young children. Raising kids, it's not easy. And we owe that to our parents. If we could only appreciate it when we were younger, maybe we would give them less of a hard time. Of course, they taught us the morals and ethics in raising us, and they gave us the tools for life, right? Our parents are the ones who were here for us or are here, and therefore, because they were here for us lovingly and unconditionally, therefore, we owe it to them. It's this debt of gratitude that we have to pay to our parents. And I know some argue that, well, they had negative experiences. Sadly, some have experienced abuse by their parents. And there's no excuse for that, and that's not the purpose of our discussion. But I would like to highlight that the negative doesn't cancel the positive. All the good that a parent has done for us is not in any way dismissed just because there was negative as well. The Talmud tells us that children have to provide for their parents' needs, and it includes their food, clothing, and shelter, all the basics that they provided to us. We ought to reciprocate and take care of them. And this is another concept in Jewish law called Pirah and Chov, which is to reciprocate, just as they did it for us lovingly and patiently. You know why God makes babies cute? Who would have the patience to change a dirty nappy, a diaper in the middle of the night from a crying little... God makes them cute. So we have that feeling of affection and love for them. But of course, it's not just about what we do for them that is important, but also how we go about doing it for them. And that's not always easy when we're also raising our children, how to care for our parent at the same time while raising our children. But it's not just about what they did for us that we're reciprocating, it's also how. And they did it with love, care, and patience, and we have to reciprocate in the very same way. And I will just illustrate that with a personal anecdote. I recall 13, 14 years ago when I was sitting Shiva for my mother. And I recall a few interesting visitors who came to pay their Shiva respects to us. And one was a venerable Rosh Yeshiva. And I was wondering why. My parents weren't the wealthiest in town. Why would he pay this visit? And he explained to us that he had to sometimes collect for his organization, which was outside the community, and he would sometimes come to our neighborhood to collect funds. And he said, your mother, my mother was the one who was home, she would always give him a cup of coffee or tea, give him whatever generous donation she was able to afford. But the point was, she did it with care. It wasn't a large donation. They weren't able to afford that. But how she gave the donation. And we had a similar instance where the postal person, the mail lady, came by and she also paid her respects and said the same thing. Your mother would invite me inside on a hot day to cool off in the air conditioning. She would invite me to warm up on a cold day. And not always was that possible. But it's about how you do the mitzvah. So when we care for our parents, we have to give as testing as it could be to our patients. It should be done with the greatest patience, with the greatest sensitivity, care, and love. And one who works with senior citizens all the time, I could see how some are really treated with patience, care, and love. Granted, each situation, all circumstances are unique, but we have to try our very best to do what we can with love, care, patience, and everything that would entail, just as we would want to be treated. And the final halachic point I'd like to emphasize is we know that as we're about to receive the Big Ten on Shavuos, we know that the 10 Commandments were on two sets of tablets. One side were the laws that are bein Adam lamakom, that is the divine relationship, laws related between man and God. And the second set of the tablets were the laws that are bein Adam lachavero, interpersonal relationships, those that have to do with the way we treat others. Yet, interestingly, where do we find the law of respecting, of honoring our parents? It's not on the second side that would be included with the interpersonal relationships, but rather it's included on the first set of the tablets, the one that is divine, our relationship with God. And why is that? Well, we start off with the first 3 commandments, has to do with belief in Hashem. And then has to do, the fourth one, what's the fourth law? About, remember the day of Shabbos. That obviously is divine. It's not between our friends, even though there's many benefits in that as well. But certainly honoring our parents, what does that have to do with our divine relationship? And very briefly to explain, number one is, it reminds us of our source. Just as the first 4 commandments take Shabbos included. Shabbos reminds us the source of everything we have in our life is from God, and therefore we take that one day off of work. We break for one day. It's a pause. It's an oasis in time. We realize that God is the source of our income, not our work. Think of how many people in the current situation are off work. It's a little bit of a wake-up call. The entire coronavirus was a little bit of wake-up call of who's boss of the universe. So by recalling that God is the one who provides for our needs, and that Shabbos is our day of rest because that's what God ordained. Likewise, it reminds us, just as we come from our parents and taking us all the way up to the original source, to Almighty God creating Adam and Eve at the beginning of creation. Of course, it is also, we know, where did we receive our Judaism, our traditions from? It's passed down to us by whom? None other than our parents. And therefore, we have to express that reverence, that care, and that love to them who've given us everything we have. So the point is, number one, it is about an attitude of gratitude, reciprocating to our parents what they've done for us, and doing so in the most appropriate way, and realizing that this is as divine as observing Shabbos. Let's just get into a few practical suggestions, because we know that at this time there are many challenges that people are facing, and therefore let's just look at a few practical suggestions how to really care for our parents while at the same time looking after our children. So number one is for those who have parents in their home, I would say you do have to be able to set those clear boundaries, and you have to know what you can do, what you're capable of doing, and realizing and being comfortable to say no in the areas that you cannot do. And you got to determine your own needs, whether it's a break for exercise or a video chat in the current condition, or going for an exercise outdoors if that's a possibility. Here we have total lockdown at the moment, so that's not really an option, but we're going into the next level of lockdown next month, where those things will be a little bit eased and people can do exercise. The point is you have to make some time for yourself, and you have to prioritize the important activities. Forget certain non-essentials, because you're looking after children, you're looking after parents. It's a juggling act, balancing both responsibilities. You have to realize what is a priority, what's non-essential. Sometimes that can be challenging in its own way. And don't hesitate to ask for help. Some people take on way too much. I wasn't present to look after my father in the last 10, 11 years, but I know that my siblings who did live close to him, and they were able to split and delegate different responsibilities to each other. And I'm most grateful to them for looking after him in that way. And I think when one is in a position to do that, then to do so. And if you're not able to do something, then try to seek out assistance from maybe friends or neighbors, coworkers, your own children. If you're in the sandwich generation, kids can help out. I was delighted as a child I used to love visiting my grandmother, and when she would come visit us, it was the greatest privilege to be part of her life and to know that she was part of my life. And as she was aging and getting older, she was like my own parent, and I was delighted to be part of helping her out when she needed that help. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a parent engaging their children. Obviously, there's limits to it, and we can't expect grandchildren to assist in the same way. But I'm just throwing out some ideas. Perhaps you have a better idea, and please feel free to share it right here on the chat so others could see, and I'll be delighted to read out loud whatever suggestion or idea that you have. But the point is, engage with others. I know that as a community here in Johannesburg, people love to volunteer. We started last week, a few weeks ago after Pesach, a program of Adopt a Senior. We have two angles. One is Adopt a Senior, the other is Assist a Senior. For assisting a senior, we provide people with permits, and they're able to pick up food parcels and whatever packages we have at the Central Chabad House, and they could bring it to senior citizens' homes. Adopt a Senior is where we give you 1 or 2 or 3, as many as you can handle, senior citizens who you would call once a week, check in on them, see how they're doing. From our perspective, we only expect that one just calls and sees how they're doing. I won't mention names, but this week I received a phone call from a family that said they were very upset about the volunteer who was adopting their senior. And my heart was about to sink. I didn't know what could this volunteer have done wrong. Who knows what I'm going to hear. They tell me the volunteer called this elderly person who they adopted and asked them what they could do for them. And this elderly gentleman gave a long laundry list of things he needed, from home essentials to food, you name it. And the volunteer went and spent thousands of rands, hundreds of dollars, on buying these needs. And they were so embarrassed that this person did that. And I was the go-between. So at least it was in a positive sense. And I went back to the volunteer, said the family insists on paying. And the volunteer said, no, I insist on paying. It's my mitzvah. I adopted the senior. People in the community, to one degree or another, will always be happy to help out, to lend a hand, to get involved. And if it's taking a toll on you and you have to be there for your parents, well, kids could help out at home. Kids could pitch in the household chores. Communication is so important. I think if there are other people who are looking after the parents, siblings, then update other family members, whether it's through email or text groups or Google Drive documents. I'm grateful to my siblings who are always updating us and keeping us somewhat in the loop. I remember, though, once finding out my father was in the hospital, and I asked one of my brothers, why didn't I know about it? And he said, why should I burden you with it? You're at a long distance. But there is something, and I'm grateful to him. He figured there was nothing that I could personally do. But what I do realize is that when we share the load, there's no reason for you yourself to be overburdened. If you have siblings or other family members who could help out, share with them. See what each person can do, can pitch in. It might not be their responsibility if they're not a direct child. They don't have the mitzvah of kabed es avicha v'es imecha. It's not their parent. But you can certainly share your concerns with others, and you never know, someone who's gone through the same experience as you can have ideas that will help you alleviate some of the challenges that you yourself are facing. I know some people talk to their employers, and you have to see what kind of options you have. Perhaps, COVID-19 has shown us people can work from home, and employers might be more flexible, providing different types of work schedules based on one's needs of looking after their elderly parent. And you're not going to have that mitzvah for all of your life. And as long as you do have it, we know this mitzvah comes with a perk. It comes with a reward. And the reward is Lema'an Yarichun Yamecha. God will give you longevity. It comes with one of the great, hardly any other, there's only one other mitzvah in the whole Torah that comes with such a great incentive, because it has its challenges. And the more the elderly they get, sometimes there's incontinence and other challenges that are with it. It's certainly not easy. But we have this privilege and responsibility to do so. And we certainly should. At the same time, you have a responsibility to look after your children if you are part of Generation X, the sandwich generation. And therefore, you have to find ways to balance it, focus on the needs of your family, of yourself, because only if you're healthy and if you have that balance will you truly be able to fill both responsibilities. So my closing words today is, it is a privilege and a mitzvah to look after your loved ones, your elders, as well as your children, and whatever way you can do this. I know that my own mother had said to me, she doesn't want to be a burden onto her children. Unfortunately, she didn't get to an old age, but she said, you put me into a facility. Some parents don't want that. I think these are all matters that have to be taken into consideration when looking after elderly parents and at the same time caring for young children. So, realize the privilege that you have in this mitzvah. Seize the opportunity. If you're looking after them, do it with love, care, and sensitivity. If your parents are at a distance, call them, be in touch with them. Tell them that you love them. Let them know. Don't just harbor those feelings inside. I was very privileged to be in touch with my parents. They insisted every single day. And now that I'm approaching the first yahrzeit of my father, I realized this year was difficult, missing those calls. My children sometimes, months after my father passed away, would sometimes say, we have to call Zaidi, and then realize, oh no, because since we moved to South Africa nearly 11 years ago, that was something my children always did. As they were growing up, they knew Erev Shabbos, the grandkids call Zaidi. And for me, it was a daily check-in call because my father insisted he wanted that. And it's not difficult in today's day and age to call your elderly parent. And better yet, to make it a video call. And in recent years, I was able to do video calls with them. And you could see their condition. And you could see the deterioration. And you'll realize what you can do and how you could help them. So call them. Let them know you love them. And I wish every one of you a beautiful Yom Tov, Kabbalah Satorah, B'simcha, B'pnimius, to receive the Torah in a renewed and personal way. And this is the best way to see Shavuos not as his story, but rather as our story, applying each of the commandments in our life. I hope I was able to share with you some useful ideas on how one can look after the elderly parents. Please God, in a future episode, we could go through greater detail on the spiritual side, on the halachic side, as well as the practical side. Thank you.